경애하는 수령 김일성 대원스님께서는 다음과 같이 교시하시었다. 띄어쓰기를 잘 교조하는 것은 우리 글을 빨리 읽고 쉽게 이해하게 하는 데서 중요한 위위를 가진다. One thing you notice if you read North Korean primary text for any length of time is that unless you're reading a translation of a foreign work, they always begin with 위대한 수령의 명언, words of wisdom from the great leader, most of which are, well, they're words anyway. It really has to be the most boring aspect of their job, really. They have to get called up apparently every single time somebody's writing a new textbook so that they can then provide some sort of quote, most of which, I have to say, aren't terribly enlightening. This one in particular means proper standardization of word separation rules is of great importance, as it will allow for quick reading and easy understanding of our language. 안녕하십니까? DPRK 앨리스입니다. Hello and welcome again to Things Polyglots Know. I'm Elise Hendrick. And today we're going to continue in the series on things that you might find surprising or confusing when reading North Korean primary sources. This time our topic is it me or are North Korean words really, really long? And the short version is, it's not you. For the most part, it's the same words that you're used to looking at in South Korean sources, with certain exceptions. There's plenty of words that each Korea has that the other one doesn't really use. But in North Korea, they have different rules on grouping the words, on what counts as a discrete word and what is separate. When I was researching this, I found that I had initially been relying on a secondary school grammar textbook from one of the North Korean handheld device dumps by the Korea Computer Center, who I talked about the last time. That material, incidentally, is very worthwhile if you're looking to get an idea of what kind of things are published for domestic consumption in the DPRK. But in any case, when I was researching this and trying to find some more detail on the exact rules, I discovered that on a Japanese website, the actual editorial standards for how Korean is to be written in the North are published. They're available online, in Korean, obviously, hosted on a Japanese website. I'm going to pop the link in the description. Now, the TLDR version of this is that in North Korean, in Munhwao, as they call it, cultured language, the tendency is to group more elements together that would actually be considered separate in the South. For example, 하고 있다. In the North, that's one word. In fact, anytime you see 고 있다 attached to a verb, that is going to be all one word with the preceding verb, whereas in South Korea, you're used to seeing it as two. It's the same as another example of this is 할 수 있다. In the South, 수 is an independent word in its own right. In the North, they seem to want to cut down on the number of monosyllabic suffixes that are treated as their own word. You see that in general. For example, one of the most common words in the Korean language, and also one of the hardest to translate a lot of the time, 것, which sometimes means thing, and the rest of the time is a particle that's used to parse everything preceding it as a noun, essentially. In the South, you will see that as starting its own word. In the North, on the other hand, it doesn't. It is always attached to the preceding verb. This is also true. So, for example, 하는 것 is one word. 할 것 is one word. Another example of this is 때문, as in because of. Now, that is an independent word in the South, and in the North it just treated as a suffix that is attached to it. Similarly, the words for person that are occasionally the monosyllabic words for person, ja and pun, are also both attached to the verb preceding it. Similarly, when you have words like motu, meaning all, or jatse, meaning itself, or themselves, or himself, or herself, etc., that is treated as just a suffix to the preceding word that it modifies. So it's all one word. For example, 근로자들 모두. That's all one word in the North. In the South, it would be two, with 모두 being its own thing. Now, these can stack up fairly quickly, because if 것 is just treated as a suffix to a word, everything that attaches sometimes as a suffix to 것, say 것처럼, 것이라고 하다, or anything like that, also ends up attaching to the same word that 것 is attached to. So, and these things do stack up very quickly. You can end up with really, really long words as a result of this. For example, 전민과학기술인 전민과학기술인재와 It's a long one. 전민과학기술인재와 하기 때문이란 것은 아니고 다른 것 때문이라고 생각한다. For example. Now, you'll notice that I've put up the hanja, the Chinese characters, for that really long word, 전민과학기술인재와, which I encountered just recently in an editorial in the North Korean newspaper Rodong Shinmun. It is a good example of something that's not all that easy to translate literally, but yes, I would say STEMification, because literally it means turning the entire people into science and technology personnel. That's the literal gloss on the thing. The hua means to change something into something like ization, inje, personnel, human resources, 과학 기술, science and technology, 전민, the whole people. Yeah, there are lots of examples of this. For example, another one you see quite a lot is 강성대국 건설. Now, 강성대국 is a slogan that you see all over the place in North Korean propaganda, and it's another one that's not exactly easy to translate. And the characters, which I'm showing on the screen right now, amount to strong growth, big country. It basically, the idea of growing to become an economic power is essentially what it's referring to. Now, you see that often just as those four characters, but then sometimes you will actually see the word konsol, or building, added to it. So the construction of a strong, economically growing country. They can just sort of pop these things together almost infinitely, and the result is that a lot of the time the words look really long. And one note, the reason you'll notice that I'm putting the hanja, the Chinese characters, up for these things, and the reason for that is that I've found that there are two sorts of people when it comes to Chinese characters in languages that aren't Chinese. They're the people who've never really gotten all that far, or at least are just starting to learn to use them now, and often find them exceedingly frustrating and kind of wish they didn't exist so they wouldn't have to memorize all of them. And then there are people, and I'm in the latter group, who have spent long enough time with Chinese characters in non-Chinese languages that it's actually kind of hard to understand what is meant without seeing them sometimes. Because the thing about Chinese loanwords is that they have a lot of homophones, which in the north is 소리 같은 말, and in the south, 동음이비요. The north uses a native Korean term, 소리 같은 말, all in one word, notice, just to get back to our topic, which means same sound word, which whereas the South Korean word and also the Japanese word as well means same sound, different meaning word. 동음이비요. Now, there are lots of those because the main distinguishing feature that exists to help tell the difference between things that have the same collection of vowels and consonants in the original Chinese, in whether it's Han Chinese or Putonghua or Guangdonghua, is that there are tones, for example. And of course, you can also distinguish it simply because you can look at it and see the character and you know which one it means. But in, say, Japanese and Korean, where there are large numbers of Chinese borrowings, you don't have that visual aid. Well, you don't in Korean. In Japanese, of course, you do. In Japanese and Korean, on the other hand, you don't have the tone to really make the distinction, and so the visual aid of the character actually, I find, is extremely helpful. And because without it, it becomes often somewhat difficult to distinguish between two very different meanings of a word. For example, in Korean, there's a Sino-Korean word, jawi. Jawi. Now, there are two ways, there are probably more, but there are two ways that immediately come to mind that this can be used. I mean, there are two types of Chinese characters this can come from. First of all, we have jia, meaning self, and wi, meaning defense, so self-defense, jiawi. However, there is also another option. The self is the same, jia, in both cases as self. However, there's also jiawi, as in self-comfort, which is a word for masturbation. A bit of a range of meaning there, a little bit different, and certainly gives an interesting subtext to... line from the North Korean song Kim Il-sung Daewon-su Man-man-se, or Long Live Field Marshal Kim Il-sung, which could mean, and is of course supposed to mean, he has made this land a strong country capable of self-defense. But on the other hand, it could also, without the hanja to help you make the distinction, just as well mean he has made this a powerful country in the field of masturbation. Which, see, that's one of those things that you can't unsee. At least that I can't. Which is why North Korea isn't on my travel itinerary, well, or wouldn't be if there was such a thing as a travel itinerary right now. The other thing that comes into this, you'll notice with these Sino-Korean word colossuses, like 전민과학 기술인재화 or 대중적 기술혁신운동. The mass technological revolution movement, to take just the literal gloss on it, is that in the North, when something is thematically related in one of these huge, in one of these Sino-Korean compound words, the tendency is to just hook them on. For example, you notice the connecting word chok, the hanja for which I'm just going to show here, meaning related to, of, pertaining to. Now, that would often be a dividing line in a Sino-Korean compound in the South. Not always. I've seen it both ways. But in the North, that actually means that it will definitely hook on as a single word to whatever is following it, without exception. Similarly, you have things like 사회주의 조선, Socialist Korea, which is specifically all one word because the idea is that it has value as sort of a slogan, and things that have value, that have that sort of utility as a slogan, tend to be crushed together as Sino-Korean compounds more than other things, which is how you get things like 강성대국건설, 대중적 기술혁신운동, 전민과학기술인재화, and the rest of them. Essentially, this is what you're looking at, and this is why it's not you. The words in North Korean text are just longer, although most of the time it's just the same words. Most of the time, all it is they've divided them up differently, because in the North, they prefer to avoid these sort of hanging single syllables that are actually just, modifying what comes before them. And so you get these just sort of monster Hangul compounds that take up half of the line, and where if you're not used to them, you will find yourself more or less trying to search out how to divide them up. Because, of course, part of reading fluency is that you're actually mostly just sort of looking at the shape of the thing, that what it starts with and what it ends with, and your brain is already sort of doing a really fast predictive text for you. And because in the North they divide these things up differently, finding the end is actually difficult if you're not used to it. So in short, that is why North Korean words actually are longer, even though, for the most part, they're actually the same words. Thank you for listening. This has been another installment of Things Polyglots Know. I'm Elise Hendrick, and if you like this, I would absolutely love it if you were to like and subscribe, and I'm always happy to see new supporters on my Patreon page, the link for which is about to show up. See you soon.